heart of where innovation, money, and power collide in Silicon Valley and beyond. This is Bloomberg Technology with Caroline Hyde and Ed Ludlow.
Live from New York and San Francisco, this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, Telegram CEO Pavel Durov is detained in France on alleged child protection failures. Telegram-linked crypto, it sinks.
And SpaceX to the rescue. Elon Musk's company will bring 2 stranded astronauts home from the ISS after Boeing's capsule failings.
And Apple's biggest event of the year is set for September 10th, when the latest iPhones, watches and AirPods on deck. We're going to discuss, but first, let's just check in on the mood music that sours a little bit when it comes to risk assets. We basically wiped out all of last week's gains. We're now down a percentage point, bouncing off of some of our lows. But more broadly, Ed, we're seeing the benchmarks down in terms of S&P and indeed technology stocks. You're seeing money move into the small caps. And more broadly, perhaps you're a bit worried about geopolitical tensions. Maybe you're just trying to digest what we saw last week in terms of Jay Powell. But for now, tech just under a little bit of pressure. What are you watching on the micro?
Well, some of that pressure coming from Nvidia, off-session lows, but it's a week where Nvidia in its earnings after market close Wednesday are probably the single biggest market catalyst. And the reason I say that is that on several occasions in recent weeks, Nvidia has been responsible for a percentage point move in either direction on the S&P 500 on its own. That's the stakes that we're talking about here. It's a big week where this name is front and center.
All eyes on a macro event that is Nvidia. How important it is to trading. Let's get to it with Valdana Heinrich, who's here to break down the pushes and the pulls in the market right now. We're still trying to digest Jay Powell and ultimately where rates go. But how important, therefore, is Nvidia to keep tech stocks, at least, managing to be near record highs?
Right, and this has been the story practically all year, if not for the past 2 years. And everybody is watching this earnings report coming out on Wednesday. A lot of people are saying it's the event. Obviously, this is a bit of a more quiet week because a lot of people are on vacation. You have liquidity that's a bit lower than typical as we're looking ahead to the U.S. holiday next week and a lot of people being out. And so you have this earnings report that would be important any other week, but this week it's taking extra significance. And as Ed mentioned, the stock does tend to move things around quite a bit, especially as we're watching the big tech firms that have led the rally all year long.
Valdana, you touched on something that's really important for the technology sector, which is the kind of eco data and Fed side of the equation is kind of been and gone now. So let's kind of recap Friday, what happened in Jackson Hole and how markets have reacted since.
Yeah, and this is the other important story of the year where everybody has been guessing and looking ahead to rate cuts from the Federal Reserve. You had Powell coming out and basically signaling that rate cuts are coming. Obviously, the employment report has been something that everybody's been watching month after month. We had those revisions coming in a couple of days ago that were a bit more surprising than expected. And so expecting the Federal Reserve to cut and Powell signaling so is definitely something that everybody's talking about and watching when it comes to the market.
While there's frustration from many a stock analyst and maybe investor that they couldn't go away this week because of Nvidia, many in the crypto space might be pleased by the rally that we've just had in Bitcoin. It's coming off of its highs, but how much does the dovish nature of things, does the macro event mean for Bitcoin and the rally to be sustained?
Yeah, the rally in crypto, for the most part, and there has been a bit of uncoupling over the past couple of months, although it's coming back a bit recently, is that you can tie it back to the risk-on environment in the stock market. So it was the story for years, basically, especially during the pandemic, where if you had tech and stocks in general rallying, you also saw cryptocurrencies rallying. We're always looking at Bitcoin because it is the largest one. It's sort of like the leader when you're looking at, who's outperforming or who's doing better in that space. But you can once again start to see some of that correlation coming back, where if stocks are rallying, Bitcoin is rallying. I know we've been talking a lot about the broadening out in the stock market. You're seeing that a bit where you're seeing more stocks in the S&P 500 hitting 52-week highs, for example, or even seeing some of the small cap ETFs seeing some inflows over the last week or so. And so for some people, it does make sense to also be seeing cryptocurrencies rallying ahead once again.
Bloomberg's Vildana Haric, great to have you back here on Bloomberg Technology. Thank you very much. Let's keep the conversation on markets going. Sylvia Jablonski is CEO and CIO at Defiance ETFs and joins us now. And this morning's kind of interesting. It's like a reset because I felt like markets, particularly the technology corner of the market, had stabilized a little bit. And we kind of knew where we stood after Jackson Hole. And now I feel like we're a little bit anxious about a certain company earnings report after Market Wednesday.
Yeah, good morning, Ed. Great to be here. I think it's exactly as you said. There's some trepidation about Nvidia earnings after the close on Wednesday, and I think until we kind of get past that next hurdle, we're going to see some volatility and probably some uncertainty in the tech names. So this morning we came in, and indices for the most part we're all in the green, and now we see some of the tech names pulling back. I think on people just kind of trying to predict what's going to happen on Wednesday. But in the grand scheme of things, I think it probably doesn't matter. We'll probably see short-term volatility, and then good, bad, whatever it is, I'm still very bullish on the actual AI rally, the crypto rally, all of these things in tech and innovation in the long term. So I think it's sort of par for the course to just get past this earnings and see what the reaction is.
There are some specific asset classes and subsectors that we want to get into, but for a second, I do want to recap Friday and the Federal Reserve. Do you kind of have a clear understanding of the path forward for rates in this country and actually globally as well now?
Well, I don't think anyone has a perfectly clear view on what the Fed does. There are a lot of factors that can always kind of change the course of policy, right? If data softens too much, perhaps he goes a little bit faster. If inflation were ever to kind of go the other way, perhaps, that gets tamed down on the cuts and things like that too. But I think what we got was what we needed. We needed the Fed to say that it's appropriate to start cutting rates, and that's what he's going to do. So whether it's the 25 bips, which I think is perfectly fine for the market, given that it does feel like we're in that soft landing scenario, and that would sort of support that, and not, bigger cut kind of might instill a little bit of fear there around things like job numbers and macro data. But I think the market got what they wanted with the Fed, and that's that we're going to take the foot off the gas pedal a little bit on rates.
Sylvia, go back to the term fear, because it felt that there suddenly was some, beginning of August, a sudden realization that maybe the market capitalization, some of these companies aren't always sustainable in the shorter term. A lot of your ETFs are leveraged bets on single stocks, particularly around the AI area. What is consumer, retail, and institutional investor appetite to be leveraged to these names right now?
It's incredibly high. If you look at one of our more popular launches, the 2 times MicroStrategy ETF, for example, has been trading millions of shares every single day. So what that tells me is that investors continue to have a high appetite for both cryptocurrency and for AI, and we're very much seeing that in the flows. So if you look at like a AVGX or SCMX, which is the super microcomputer, as well as the 2X MicroStrategy, the volume is really good, and that tells me that investors are kind of have high conviction on those sectors and on the AI names, and they continue to trade them. And particularly around Nvidia this week, right? So if Nvidia has positive earnings, that could move Broadcom, that could move super microcomputer. The move in crypto, I mean, if you look at MicroStrategy historically, it's been 6x crypto in some cases over time in terms of performance. So when crypto is up, whatever 2%, this might be up 12% or so, and that varies through time and things like that. But if you compare MicroStrategy to Bitcoin itself, the different Bitcoin ETFs, it's just crushing it. So I think investors like that.
But you used the perfect word, they're trading it. Are all
Yes.
people trading these? They're not long-term investors in a 2X MicroStrategy or Broadcom.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at the levered, ETFs space, there are all sorts of types of people trading them. You have high frequency trading firms, you have market makers, institutions, and retail. When you go back and look at the data, it's always been the case that the holding period has been a day or two on average. So that tells us that in the balance, most people are taking active, views on this and trading every day. That might not mean that they sell it at the end of the day, but that means that they look at their account at the end of the day and make a decision whether or not they want to be long for another day. So very much short-term, critical observation on a daily basis, but the holding period is kind of up to the user in terms of what they view the trend to be and underlying volatility to be.
So let's end on what the story is behind Bitcoin. Okay, I always pull up my terminal chart and I look at what happened since March and now, and it basically trades like a risk asset between 70,000 US dollars per token and 60,000. And I don't see the bigger picture anymore that all our guests were talking up over the last 4 years.
Yeah, I think, the bigger picture there is still kind of like the things that have happened very recently with Bitcoin. I think, you have this huge group of people that believe that, digital currency is the future of currency, kind of non-regulated in terms of, government-backed type of currency. You have a digital asset that trades on a blockchain. People still like that. And you have institutional adoption. So the fact that ETFs have come out on this product has increased demand because the average person is able to get exposure to that. So you have the demand story. And I think, just in terms of like a micro strategy, you have a company that's an AI company that, has a huge part of their balance sheet invested in digital currency and believes it's the future of, perhaps business transaction, exchange of funds, blockchain technology, things like this. And, you still have a lot of investors that are very much looking for that disruptive, innovative technology. And Bitcoin continues to be probably the best proxy for that in the currency space.
Sylvia, it's great to get you back on the show. Have a good rest of the day and week. Sylvia Jablonski, CEO and CIO at Defiance ETFs. Meanwhile, coming up, we're going to look at the impact of Telegram's CEO detention over in France. That's next on Bloomberg Technology. Now, over the weekend, Pavel Durov, he's the CEO of Telegram, was detained in France. Durov is suspected of failing to take steps to prevent criminal use of Telegram, the social media platform. That's according to AFP. That's a local French news organization. Since then, a Telegram-linked blockchain project has lost about $2.7 billion in its own market value. Look, it all reflects the uncertainty sparked by the detention of the app co-founder. Joining us for more now, Bloomberg's Paris bureau chief, Alan Katz. Pretty sensational stuff. He steps off a private jet and he's whisked away.
It's very surprising, actually. I mean, France, like some other countries, has been in a bit of a fight with social media companies over this issue of content moderation, which really seems to be at the core of what they are going after Durov for. But the idea of just grabbing the CEO and throwing him in jail is really quite a surprising raising of the stakes of all of this. And so it was quite dramatic with Saturday evening, and no one was particularly expecting it. So it's been quite an exciting weekend. And one of the questions becomes sort of when do they actually go forward on this? Durov has been in jail since Saturday evening. They could have let him out. Normally, the initial period for something like this, an initial period of detention would be 24 hours, renewable once, which they renewed it on Sunday evening. But that renewal, which usually isn't for another 24 hours, can be longer depending on the crime that they are looking into, including organized crime, or crime sort of in a group, or even longer if it's terrorism. And he's been held he's being held under the sort of organized crime grouping. It doesn't mean organized crime in terms of sort of mafia. What it means is that you're doing something in a network or in a group effect. But it does mean that he can be held without being charged for another couple of days. So it's quite a long time if you run through Saturday evening all the way until Wednesday evening, when they would have to decide to either charge him, release him, or call him, or keep him sort of as what's called a material witness.
The reaction is, as Kara points out, is kind of playing out in crypto assets that are linked to Telegram. I think French President Macron also took to social media in the last hour to point out that this arrest was not a political decision. But what are the basic accusations? What are the failings that the Telegram CEO is being accused of?
So the basic failing, and it's a sort of a hard concept, perhaps, particularly for American viewers, is the basic failing is for lack of content moderation by the platform. And so fundamentally, what the accusation is that there's lots of bad stuff happening over the Telegram platform. And some of that stuff includes potentially child sexual assault materials, or it could include drug dealing. It could include all sorts of very bad things that are happening on the Telegram platform, and that the company, and Durov as the CEO of the company, has deliberately either turned a blind eye or failed to take any actions to rein that in. So that's the failing that we're talking about here. So it's not necessarily any actual actions that Durov or Telegram took. In fact, it's the opposite. It's the lack of action they've taken despite requests by government, in this case France, to do something, particularly to rein in the issue of child sexual abuse materials.
Yeah. In a statement released, in fact, on the platform on Sunday, and I think they took to X as well, it's a Dubai-based company, and they said that Durov has nothing to hide and that Telegram abides by European laws. Alan Katz, we really appreciate you breaking that all down for us. And Ed, you referenced it just a moment ago. Look, we are a show that focuses on the flow of money. Here we can see what is ultimately the read across to a coin, a crypto that is related to Telegram. In many ways, it was first fostered by Telegram. It's all about entertaining the ability to move money around using the social media platform. Toncoin, it's called. It's dropping $2.7 billion thereabouts lost in terms of market capitalization. But Ed, what have you got?
Yeah, some other news in talking tech. And first up, shares of Paytm dropped after a report that India's markets watchdog asked it for more information relating to its IPO. The stock fell as much as 8.9% after reports that the Securities and Exchange Board of India issued a so-called show cause notice to the founder and some of its board members. The regulator is looking into whether Paytm misrepresented facts during the IPO process. Plus, Pinduoduo's shares fell 18% after the Temu owner posted disappointing revenue and warned of declining growth, highlighting the challenges of sustaining its pace of expansion against intense competition. The Chinese-owned e-commerce platform reported revenue of 97.1 billion yuan, $13.6 billion. That's for the June quarter. And IBM is shutting down a key research division in China in a move affecting more than 1,000 employees. Local media, including Nikkei, reported the company's shuttering 2 business lines that specialize in research and development and testing, and instead turn towards serving private enterprise and select multinationals that are operating in China as it goes forward in that market. Let's talk about SpaceX. The company plans to launch a mission aimed at performing the first commercial spacewalk, sending 4 private astronauts, including billionaire Jared Isaacman, on a trip into a very high orbit around Earth for a mission dubbed Polaris Dawn. Joining us now to review and preview is Laurie Garver, operating advisor at Bessemer Venture Partners, but also a former NASA deputy director. And we're talking 700 kilometers of altitude. Opening a capsule that has to first have its pressure adjusted. You know the history of what the agency did. What about what SpaceX plans to do tomorrow morning?
Well, this is a very exciting mission, whether it was a government NASA mission or what it is, which is SpaceX and the private entrepreneur Jared Isaacman paying for this. So it does not involve our tax dollars. The other 3 individuals going with Jared are SpaceX employees. So it's a really exciting mission. It is stretching the envelope, pushing out the barriers to what I know Jared is driving toward, which is a spacefaring civilization. You need to take new risks, and that's what they're planning to do here.
How radiation impacts humans, obviously also how Starlink laser beam communications manages at these sorts of altitudes. Laurie, where does it push us forward to? Ultimately, what does it mean for also NASA working alongside on these more experimental high risks projects?
Well, you know, one of the reasons SpaceX has been so successful is that they've taken things step by step. And we at NASA, when I was there, allowed them to carry cargo first to the International Space Station. After they developed this rocket largely with their own funds, we got a lot of confidence with that and then allowed them to take astronauts. Now they are taking astronauts beyond where the space station is to a much higher orbit and, as you noted, going on the first commercial spacewalk. We will learn, we in the government, from these activities. They've developed a new spacesuit. NASA spends a lot of money on spacesuits and takes a lot of time to do these things. SpaceX is showing us the way, and if it is successful, I think NASA will be not far behind in trying to embrace this and be able to utilize SpaceX ultimately for even more activities. They have proposed servicing Hubble. I think this mission is planned, as Jared initially, as a precursor to being able to boost the Hubble Space Telescope to an orbit where we could use it for longer scientifically. NASA has not yet opened that door. So if this succeeds, I think we'll see SpaceX back trying to make that happen.
We got confirmation over the weekend that it's SpaceX to the rescue, that the 2 astronauts stranded on ISS will return in Dragon capsule because of the issues with Boeing and its capsule. How do you react to that? And how does NASA react to that long term?
It's surprising that the Boeing program, Starliner, has had so many problems when they were awarded both Boeing and SpaceX these contracts through the government. They got a lot more money. It's taken them now more than 4 more years and now not successful. That said, the point of competition is to drive and make things better, and we successfully have SpaceX and Dragon able to do this. So I think part of this story isn't really that the astronauts are stranded, but that we have this option with the Dragon to bring them down. Of course, we also have the Russian Soyuz program, which 10 years ago, NASA was more than happy to use as a backup. So it's a setback for Boeing. It's something that NASA had hoped wouldn't happen, but it reinforces the value of what NASA's plan has been. And frankly, all props to SpaceX.
All right, Garva. Just so great to have you on the show discussing an operating advisor at Bessemer Venture Partners and, of course, former NASA Deputy Administrator. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Caroline Hyde in New York.
And I'm Ed Ludlow in San Francisco.
Quick check on these markets, Ed, because look, we've got a bit of caution when it comes to risk assets today. The Nasdaq is currently off by 0.8%. We're bouncing off of our lows, but maybe we're drawing breath after a bit of a rally last week, after, of course, Jay Powell, Jackson Hole, and the promise of rate cuts to come. We are still seeing that geopolitical tension being interwoven into oil prices, for example, are up another 3% when you're looking at NYMEX crude. Bitcoin off by 1.3%, but remember, we had rallied over the weekend and we're currently at 63,000 higher than we have been in recent weeks. Move on and have a look at some of the individual movers. Of course, all eyes trained on one Nvidia. It is down on the day. That's why broadly the tech benchmarks are lower as well. But earnings, August 28th, what does it signal in terms of the commitment to AI spend? I'm looking also at PDD. What a brutal move. The US, of course, traded depository receipts currently under pressure as revenue still grew more than 80%, but that is down from what we are used to. And we're seeing PDD, owner of Temu, signal that largely we're going to see a slowing in growth. I'm also looking at Uber, which got a hefty fine, more than $300 million for transferring data on drivers from Europe over to the United States. We're off by 2.4%. But Ed, let's just dig into the broader context here when it comes to technology investing.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about private markets as well. Our next guest is Brian Ruder, partner at Permira, a global investment firm with $89 billion in assets under management or total capital. The firm's most notable tech transactions include Zendesk, McAfee, Informatica, and LegalZoom. And effective September 1st, Brian will assume the role of co-managing partner and co-CEO of Permira, and he's dubbed the tech expert. Brian is here with me in San Francisco. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ed.
This is a large firm with some history, and this is probably one of the more significant changes in structural leadership that the firm's gone through. Just start with what you plan to do differently and what the approach to tech will be when you take charge September 1st with your co-CEO.
Yeah, I'm honored to be able to take the position and share that with my colleague and friend Dipan Patel and taking over from my colleague and friend Kurt Bjorklund and Tom Lister before him. This is just one in a series of multiple leadership transitions that the firm has undergone during the 40-year history that we've been in business. It's a very happy, continuous transition. Kurt is remaining as executive chair in the business, and so he's not going anywhere. And we're looking forward to continuing advancing this strategy. Deepan and I bring a bit more of a technology bent to us, but that doesn't mean we're going to change the strategy wholehearted to being only about tech. We actually think some of the most exciting and interesting areas to continue to invest in are not just our very strong technology sector, our digital consumer sector, but also healthcare and services.
We listed at the top some of the transactions that the firm's been involved in and that have taken place. Move that forward. What kind of sectors, subsectors, specific corners of the technology world would you pay attention to?
We think software will continue to be a really exciting area to invest in. It's our largest area that we have been investing in for the last several funds, both in our buyout flagship strategy as well as our minority premier growth opportunities fund strategy, which is more focused on minority faster growth investing. And that's really driving mostly around the cloud transition and increasingly AI, which is on the cloud side is still a 30-year plus transition that is still in mid-cycle. So there's a lot of cloud transition still to go that's driving quite a bit of growth inside that portfolio. AI is becoming a more interesting driver in that segment too. We actually think, if we talk AI, some of the more interesting areas to invest around the AI transition are actually outside of software, more in the services portfolio where you're automating business processes and frankly you're competing with businesses that might not have quite the same digital backbone that really every software company today has.
And so then dictate for us, Brian, when you're looking to do a take private, and when you talk of software, I'm looking at Squarespace, you're looking at taking that private at about, I think, a $6.9 billion valuation. What secret sauce do you want to inject? What sort of growth do you stimulate when you've taken a company private?
Yeah, well, I can't speak about Squarespace. It hasn't closed yet as a public company. But more generally, when we have any software company that we're looking to invest behind, there's usually a core great product capability there. We invest in product-forward, product-led growth. We're typically investing behind the market leader, oftentimes the market creator in a segment of the technology ecosystem. But there's usually something that we can tune with them in collaboration with those management teams to help improve the operation, whether it be pricing and packaging, the Salesforce organization, how actually they're doing their own product investing. But at the core, we're investing in product-led growth. And I should say, philosophically, we're a unique investor at large scale in that we're tending to back continued growth and expansion of growth rather than what most of private equity tends to do, which is help companies find their maximum EBITDA margin. We'd like to help companies find their maximum efficient revenue growth rate, and that's typically higher than what they've been able to achieve on their own.
And you've got some product experts that come on as advisors, right? Carolyn Everson, we all know her from a time at Facebook that became Meta, but also she's with the likes of Coca-Cola, she's with Disney on boards. You've also got Simon Segars that we know of, Arm, back in the UK. That really speaks to a global nature that you have at Permira. How are you looking at global opportunities? Is it all about US investing? What is it in Europe and Asia even?
Yeah, the U.S. is our largest and most important market that we invest in, just simply the scale of what this market represents for us. Europe is our original market. It's a very significant market for us to invest in. I'd say as a technology investor, we have a wonderful set of senior advisors around the world. Carolyn, you mentioned coming from Meta and really building the ad business there. Simon from Arm, a fellow Brit, having run that business. But we have other people in product and technology around the world. Europe has been a very interesting market for technology. We've been very positively surprised actually with not so much Europe as an end market, but actually Europe as an innovation hub, especially in our growth fund. Businesses like NextThink in Switzerland, Miracle in France, Flixbus in Germany. These are all businesses that are global leaders but headquartered in Europe. And so the talent, the entrepreneurial talent, as well as the engineering talent that we're able to find in those countries, I'd say has been a really big positive upside over the last decade.
Brian, you've been with the firm since 2008 and you're based in Menlo Park. And I think we hear about the role of private equity in a different context these days, maybe more of a strategic investor. You talked about the willingness to back revenue growth. How has things changed or shifted since the early days of 2008 in what technology companies might want from you relative to what you want from them?
Yeah, I started in this industry in the mid-1990s, and at that time, private equity was really a financial investor, and purely a financial investor. Yeah. You tended to buy at single-digit profitability multiples.
Get a good management team in there, etc.
Yeah, do kind of basic blocking and tackling. And typically you'd say that the businesses you'd invest in are ones that weren't very interesting to a strategic buyer. If you fast forward to today, the industry has really evolved into being a strategic investor. So we are investing in and around themes and theses and points of view about where markets and industries are going. We very frequently are a higher payer than a strategic buyer might be because we see more value in both the operational and long-term strategic potential in a business. And so there's very few companies that can't be targeted by some form of private equity capital, whether it's early stage on the venture side, all the way through growth equity and then large-scale buyouts.
Brian, so great to have some time with you. Come back on the show, we hope. Brian Ruder, partner at Permira, soon to be co-CEO. We appreciate the time. Now, we've got some breaking news regarding Pavel Durov, of course, the CEO of Telegram, who is detained in France. Now, we understand that indeed that detention will indeed last until August the 28th. So we are seeing at the moment that there is from the prosecutor that Telegram CEO detention may last until August the 28th. That's exactly what we had known. We understand that the investigating magistrate had extended his detention from 24 up to 96 hours. Remember, he stepped off his private jet on Saturday to be currently held and detained in France. Now, Ed, we've also got plenty to be discussing, like, while we see the impact of the Telegram CEO being detained and what that means for a related crypto, which is TON. We want to talk about crypto more broadly. Bloomberg's Sonali Basak is with us because the open network is something in and of itself that is currently under pressure because of the detention of Pavel Durov. But actually, crypto's had a rather nice weekend. And we have Fed Chair Powell to thank for that.
Yeah, it had a rather nice weekend. You did have Bitcoin over the weekend breach 65,000 once again. You're seeing a little bit of weakness coming into Monday, but still well above 60,000, now at around 63,000. And similarly, if you look at a price chart over the last 7 days, Bitcoin up 8%, Ethereum up 5%, even Dogecoin up another 7% over that time frame. So risk on in the crypto universe. For the most part, to your point here, there are single names that don't see the same type of love. You also, interestingly, have that narrative back under the surface again, and it is causing flows into the ETFs as well, coming back. Remember, we saw some softness there for the better part of the summer, and you also have that narrative heading into the election season about how friendly or unfriendly different administrations would be, but also that fiscal pressure. Remember, part of this is not just only a place to hide if you're worried about the world potentially. You're seeing gold up today as well as Bitcoin for the last 24 hours at least. But you also have that idea here that if you're worried about fiscal spending, then maybe Bitcoin is a good place to be. I expect to hear a lot more of that narrative heading into November.
Fiscal spending and Bitcoin in the same sentence. I think we should talk a little bit more about the ETF flows as well, because if you ask BI and James Seifert, who watches the show, what he tracks, I think he still follows the data quite closely. What are flows into Bitcoin ETFs doing, Sonali?
Well, although they are coming back, I have to say they are not coming back as robust as you would have had when the first set of flows really entered into the Bitcoin ETFs at the start of the year, back in January when they were first approved. Yet still, you did have the highest in more than a month, 252 million net inflow into a group of a dozen spot Bitcoins after that Powell pivot, let's call it. But interestingly enough here, even though you have that kind of inflow into the spot Bitcoin ETFs, I would also say importantly, you do have Bloomberg Intelligence, James Seifert in particular, really writing here about some ETFs, Solana in particular, not able to get that same kind of approval from the SEC. Now, you can call this a net positive for Bitcoin and Ethereum, now more regarded as safe in terms of regulatory approvals here in the United States. But when you think about the path forward for other tokens that might seek the same type of treatment, there's a lot of caution and a lot of uncertainty on how fast you might see that sort of thing.
Bloomberg Sonali Basak with the Bitcoin lowdown. Thank you very much. Now, coming up on the show, Magnetar closes a $235 million venture fund looking to invest in the AI revolution. We bring you the details next. This is Bloomberg Technology.
Magnetar Capital. Well, it's known as a $17.5 billion money manager investing in alternative credit and hedge funds, but the firm is pushing ever more into a newer territory, venture capital, backing startups with a real focus on generative AI technology. Jim Prosko is with us, Senior Portfolio Manager at Magnetar, and you're here in New York, along with our own Hema Palmer, I'm very pleased to say, who's helped bring this interview to bear. And look, you've already backed some well-known names in the VC space. I'm thinking of Cohere, I'm thinking of CoreWeave. Why go more focused and have a fund, a more than $200 million one at that?
Yes, well, thank you for having me on. I think because of that, because of our experience in AI ML investing going back to 2021 with CoreWeave originally and now also Cohere, we feel like we have the relationships and the expertise in the space, as well as just the time and the unique opportunity it is with all the capital going in. And finally, it's because we have a really unique product offering, both the support of Magnetar and also the dedicated compute on the CoreWeave cluster that we think just provides unique value to the potential portfolio companies.
And so your fund has a really interesting structure where it's providing your portfolio companies with compute in exchange for equity. Tell us how that works and how you determine how much compute is worth how much equity.
Yes, so we've contracted compute that's dedicated GPUs for this purpose with CoreWeave. And so potential portfolio companies will get access to the compute in exchange for equity. So like any other investment, it'd be a negotiated process on the value. But the important thing is that it solves a lot of problems for the company. Like oftentimes there's this chicken and egg issue where it's hard to contract compute if you don't have the capital. It's hard to raise capital if you don't have access to the compute. So potentially we're solving that problem by providing a direct exchange of the equity for the compute on CoreWeave's, what we believe is the top performing high performance compute cluster.
And so how are valuations looking when it comes to Gen AI companies? Is there concern that with the hype in the space that companies might be either overvalued or equity might be expensive?
Yes, well, at least we've had a little bit of pause on that. But I think it's hard to generalize. Part of our investment process is to focus on companies that have both internally the right management team, the right technology, the right moat, but are also in the right parts of the AI stack, whether that's applications or verticals where it's hard to separate the pieces so that we can be confident they're creating value.
Jim, I know a lot of firms that want to hold both private and public equities, right? And they try and work out the best mechanism or vehicle to do that. Then you have like the mutual funds who are increasingly high up the cap table for growth stage names. With that in mind, why the venture vehicle specifically? What's the benefit of launching a dedicated fund like that?
Well, I think it's the structure and the unique value proposition. So the reason it's a dedicated fund is because the fund is specifically offering compute in exchange for equity. In our other funds, we've historically invested across the cap structure in public equities, private equities, structured debt. But here, because of the unique value proposition and the way we've contracted the GPO cluster, it makes sense to offer it as a dedicated fund.
It's so fascinating that almost you're going up against, well, this is how AWS, Amazon has got in with a lot of these strategic investments. I'm sure they're offering the compute, the Microsoft. What's the relationship you now have with CoreWeave to be able to ascertain and ensure that you get that compute? Is that kind of a deal that you've struck with them? And they're happy, of course, to have yet more and more demand coming via you, I'm sure.
So we've been close partners with CoreWeave for a number of years now, both in providing them capital and just generally providing Magnetar resources to help them grow their business. And so this just was sort of the next step in the evolution of our relationship where we felt like between us we were in a position to offer this product. And we were able to work with them on contracting the compute and arrange the fund such that we can deliver that compute in exchange for equity.
And compute in hot demand, but give us some context. If a company is doing a funding round, roughly how much of that money raised could be spent on compute?
So it really depends on the company and how intensive their compute needs are. So if it's an application developing firm, it may be something, on the order of 25% of a cap raise might go to compute if they're developing some particular application. If it's for example, an LLM company that's really developing large models, then as much as 75% or more of a particular cap raise might be allocated to high-performance compute.
Jim Prusko of Magnetar Capital, great to have you here on Bloomberg Technology. Thank you very much. Mark your calendars. September 10th is when Apple plans to hold its biggest product event of the year. According to sources, the company will unveil the latest iPhones, watches, and AirPods. Bloomberg's Mark Gurman broke that story and joins us now. And it probably is the biggest event of the year, right? And the focus largely on the new generation iPhone?
Yeah, this is their biggest hardware launch of the year, right? June is when they hold their software and services conference. That's where you saw the unveiling of iOS 18, Apple Intelligence, and macOS Sequoia. Now we're going to start to see some of the new devices that those operating systems and services are geared towards. And the big entree, of course, for September 10th will be the line of new iPhone 16s, right? 4 new models that will all support Apple Intelligence. These are not major overhauls over the year prior, right? But you are going to get some nice enhancements like a new camera button that we've talked about on the side of the phone, a new processor for better AI handling, as well as slightly larger screens on the Pro models. New AirPods, big revamp to those. You're having a replacement to the low-end AirPods, right? Those haven't been updated in 5 years, as well as a replacement for the mid-tier AirPods, really trying to go after more of the headphone market. Right now, Apple does a great job at competing at that Pro price point, but going a little bit more downstream. Yeah. And the new Apple Watches, these will be significant as well.
What's significant, of course, has been your ongoing reporting. I'm not going to get Ed to act out the XLR again, but also how we're going to see the lockstep of operating system being able to be upgraded in time and the AI provisions to be there aligned with September the 20th. How is that looking at the moment, Mark?
Yeah, so these new phones will ship with iOS 18.0, right? Those are not going to have any of the Apple Intelligence features. And then Apple's going to release iOS 18.1 about 3 to 4 weeks after the phones go on sale. Those are going to include Apple Intelligence. But based on everything that I've been seeing and testing so far, the Apple Intelligence features in 18.1 are quite limited. You get summaries of incoming text message conversations. You get summaries and prioritization of emails. But you're missing some of the other tweaks like the Genmoji, where you use AI to create emojis, Image Playground, where you can create your own images using AI. But, as I've talked about, it's a pretty limited set of features at this point.
Mark, real quick before we run out of time, you got some clues on like the store timing and when the next gen rolls out on shelves?
Yeah, shelf release should be around September 20th for the new iPhones at least. So about 10 days after the announcement. And again, these are all typical, right? It's usually the first week or first Tuesday or Wednesday after Labor Day, and then the phones go on sale about a week and change after.
Mark Gurman, with all the news, we thank you so much for it. Have a great rest of your day. Meanwhile, from Apple to Telegram News to all the above, that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology.
Don't forget, check out the podcast. You know where to find it on the Bloomberg, as well as on Apple, Spotify, and iHeart. From the team here in SF, Lindsay, Jackie, Kara out in New York City, brace yourselves for a big week. This is Bloomberg Technology.